Thank you, Sunny. Thank you all. First of all, congratulations to Aditya on his book. I first visited Bombay Gym, the Bombay Gymkhana, in 1968. And it was to watch Tiger Pataudi play not cricket, but play hockey. I was already cricket mad. I was 10 years old. I was known to be obsessed with the game. And my uncle, who worked with Indian Airlines in Mumbai, knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who was a member of the Bombay Gym. And he said, this young nephew of mine wants to get a glimpse of Tiger Pataudi. And that day he was playing hockey, and if memory serves, he was an inside right. Yeah, I saw him play. That was my first visit in 1968. My second visit was in 1992, when I published my first book on cricket, Wickets in the East. And I was being interviewed by a certain Rajdeep Sardesai, then a cub reporter of the Times of India. That was my first meeting with him. It's a friendship of 25 years, which has gone through no downs, by the way, I should say, since Nandini is here. Rajdeep is a friend of 20. I disagree about one thing, which I'll come to in a bit. Right. So we were sitting here. I'd written my first book on cricket, and Rajdeep was writing about it for the Times of India, and he came to interview me. And while we were chatting, actually, Dilip also walked in. Some other member walked in before Dilip came, and he looked at Rajdeep and said, "Oh, you're here. You were a good batsman, but you were a lousy fielder. You are a lousy fielder." So that was my next visit. And I'll return to it maybe at the end of my talk. But my talk is going to be about the social, political, and cultural significance of that piece of green turf you see outside. It's not going to be about cricketing achievements. It's not going to be about centuries scored, except incidentally, and wickets taken and matches won, such as the first Test match of 1933. But what cricket and cricket in the Bombay Gym and around in the city of Mumbai symbolized for the political and social history of modern India. And I'm going to deal with three individuals who are important in this story. And so far as I know, none of them was a member of the Bombay Gymkhana. The third will be C.K. Naidu, and C.K. Naidu's name is at least known to some of you, even if not all of you know the details of his life and achievements. But the first two would be largely unknown to most of you. I mean, the second, the first, they figure in my book, Corner of a Foreign Field, which I know Sunny has read and Ayaz has read and Makarand Vagankar has read, but otherwise the rest of you won't know these people, but they're very important. The first is a man called Shahpurji Sorabji. Now, how is he? He's absolutely crucial to the history of cricket in Mumbai. And the Bombay Gym comes in as follows. The Bombay Gymkhana was built, I believe, in 1875. You all know that it was restricted to white men only in terms of membership. A Parsi called Kowasji Jahangir gave 50,000 rupees in those days to build this building. But he wasn't allowed membership inside. But he was a smart man. He didn't care. He gave the 50,000 rupees, and he probably got some concessions to trade opium with China or some such. So he was all right, right. Now, so it came up here in 1875. Now, Englishmen, especially aristocratic Englishmen, the kind of guys who would come to this club, like to play polo. The polo grounds were then in the police lines, I think about a mile away. So the Bombay Gym took over one part of the Maidan. In the other part of the Maidan, Indians had started playing cricket. Sunny mentioned the Parsis. The Parsis were the first, then the Hindus started rival the Parsis, and then of course the Muslims came in. So the Bombay Gym comes up in 1875, encloses this space. Outside, they are, as they are today, 45 cricket matches going on. All right. And the polo grounds were somewhere far away. Polo was a white game. By this time, the Indians had taken to cricket because they loved it. And they would play with whatever makeshift equipment they had. But polo, still, you needed to own a pony, you needed to be, part of the British Army, so it was a Europeans' game. Now, these British polo players would play polo, and after their game, they wanted, to have a shower, to have a glass of whiskey, but their bloody club was a mile away. So they said, what the hell, we'll play polo right here. So they started playing polo outside the club premises. And while they were playing polo outside the club premises, they destroyed the turf of the Indian cricket players. And Shahpurji Sorabji launched a 30-year battle to get the members of the Bombay Gymkhana not to play polo on the Maidan. And it's an extraordinary irony, because polo is originally an Indian game. The Goras wanted to play polo, the Kalus wanted to play the British game. Right? And, by the way, Shahpurji Sorabji's tract is called The Struggle Polo Against Cricket. And I don't think there's a copy in Mumbai. I found it in the MCC library. And it's an essay of this struggle, it's a struggle of right versus might. If you read Shahpurji Sorabji's book, you understand why Parsis are such good lawyers and judges of the High Court and the Supreme Court, right? It's very clearly and carefully argued. It's a struggle of right versus might. Because it's an argument for the sanctity of the cricket field. I mean, how can a bloody pony ruin a cricket field? I mean, would Sunny be able to bat? Would Madhav Apte be able to get his 153 in the West Indies after the polo horses had gone over the turf wicket? So it's an argument about the sanctity of the field, about the importance of not letting that piece of green turf be destroyed by horses' hooves. So it's an argument of the aesthetics and of cricket, but it's also an argument against racism. Why should white members of the Bombay Gymkhana, in their arrogance, destroy the cricket field of the ordinary Aam Aadmi? So he is the first hero of my story, and he's an amazing man. I don't know how much cricket he played, but he's the first guy who fought for the rights of Indian cricketers against white imperialists. So he's the first person I'd like to remember, because his story is connected with the Bombay Gymkhana, or shall we say, the arrogance and the elitism and the racism of the Bombay Gymkhana. It was a successful victory against the arrogance and the elitism, because he stopped and they had to go back to playing polo there. It was a 30-year struggle. It was decided in the High Court, but finally our Desi cricketers got that ground back. Right. So that is the first hero of my story, Shahpurji Sorabji. The second hero of my story is a man called Palwankar Balu. He was born in 1875 in Dharwad, which is now part of Karnataka. He was born in a Dalit household, in a family of Chamars. Now, I've told you, through the story of Shahpurji Sorabji, something about the racism of the British. But British rule in India was two-sided. It imposed hierarchy, but it also opened up opportunities. One of the incidental byproducts of British rule was that it gave Dalits more opportunities than they had under Peshwa rule. Partly because of urbanization and industrialization. And one of the avenues for Dalit emancipation or upward social mobility was employment in the army and in ammunition factories. So Palwankar Balu's father worked in the ammunition factory in Kirki. And Hindus found it polluting to work with cartridges, it had animal fat and so on. So Balu's father worked in Kirki. Balu was born in Dharwad, grew up in Pune. The Pune Club was mentioned by Sunny. In the 1890s, when Palwankar Balu was growing up in Pune, the Pune Club was like the Bombay Gymkhana, white Sunni. But the staff were colored Indians. And Palwankar Balu got a job as a groundsman in the Pune club. And the sahibs would bat, and Balu would bowl to them. You know, like Sunny became a bowler because of Bombay Gymkhana. I was a bowler too. And at least you got a chance, you can bowl, right? And there was a particular sahib called Jungly Gregg, J.G. Gregg, who played for Hampshire and the Gentlemen, and got many hundreds years later in the Bombay Gymkhana. So he wanted practice, and Balu would bowl to him. And it is said that every time Balu got him out, he got a athanni, 8 coin. And he probably got him out quite a lot, and he made some money for his family. But of course, he never got a chance to bat. If he was not bowling to Jungly Gregg, he was, mowing the ground, laying out the wicket and the chalk and so on. Now, you had the Pune club, and across you had the Indian part of the city, where Indian cricketers had started playing. And once a year, like you had the presidency match in Bombay once a year, which was Indians or Parsis versus Europeans, once a year, the Indian cricketers of Pune were allowed to play against the Pune club. And word got around of this Dalit slow left-arm spinner who was really damn good. So the Hindus of Pune said, you can join us and play for us because you seem to be very good at getting out Europeans. So you can play for us, but in the tea interval, you cannot have tea with us. Because this is the 1890s and Pune is the very den of Hindu casteist orthodoxy. So Palwankar Balu is playing for the Pune Hindus, getting all the wickets. If you read the descriptions of his bowling, he was the first great Indian spinner before Vinu Mankad and Bishan Bedi. But he cannot break bread with his fellow Hindus. Now meanwhile, in Bombay, in the Bombay Gymkhana, cricket is going apace. There is what Sadi referred to as the beginnings of competitive cricket. We now have the IPL. Before the IPL, you had the Ranji Trophy, which still continues. And before the Ranji Trophy, you had what was called the Bombay Communal Tournament between Hindus, Parsis, Muslims, and Europeans. And it was played here, because this was, the Brabant Stadium hadn't come. So, just as the Pune Hindus heard of Balu's prowess and got him to play for him, but would not allow him to have tea with them, the Bombay Hindu said, hey, there's a damn good bowler in Pune, and if we want to win in the Bombay quadrangular, maybe we should get him here. So he shifted, it still happens, Zahir Khan came from somewhere in rural Maharashtra, Srirampur, to come here. Sunil Joshi from my state came from Gadag, which is in North Karnataka, to come to Bangalore. And this still happens. People go to metros in search of work and so on. Not just in cricket, for other professions, film stars, musicians. So Balu thought this is a good inducement. I can make a more honorable career as a cricketer in Bombay than as a cricketer in Pune. Bombay was the center of Indian cricket. So he came here and started playing for the Hindus. And he was a fabulous bowler, absolutely fabulous bowler. In 1910, I beg your pardon, in 1911, the first All India team visited England. They didn't play a test match, but they played county matches, first-class matches. The captain was the Maharaja Patiala. And Balu got 150 wickets at 18 runs apiece on that tour. And some counties offered him contracts. But in 1910, imagine an Indian and a Dalit at that, going to, so it was not possible. So he came back. But when he came back, the Dalit community of Mumbai organized a felicitation for him. By the way, the Indian team did disastrously. They won 2 matches out of 34. The only success was Balu, 150 wickets at 18 runs apiece. And they organized a felicitation for him, the Dalit community, at which the Man Patra was read out by B.R. Ambedkar. Now, B.R. Ambedkar was then 19 years old. It was his first, he was a brilliant student, it was his first public address, was to order this cricketer. So Balu would play here for the Hindus, against the Muslims, against the Parsis, Europeans, and he would win matches. By this time, some of the prejudice had disappeared, so at the tea time, he could have tea with his fellow teammates. But there was still one very important privilege that was denied him. He was never made captain of the Hindu team. Although in this ground, of course he couldn't enter your lovely Gymkhana, he couldn't come here. But he was not captain even though he was the best cricketer. Only because of his caste. When I was doing research on my book, On a Foreign Field, I came across an extraordinary news report. This was the quadrangular of 1916, which was going to be played here. Now, in those days, the quadrangular, and then later which became the pentangular, when the rest joined in 35, was like the IPL of today. It was the biggest cricket tournament in India. You had live cricket commentary, radio commentary. And for weeks before, like you would have for weeks before a World Cup, you had discussion. Who's going to be the team? Who's going to be the reserve? Is there a promising young Hindu bowler? Is there a promising young Muslim batsman from Aligarh who may make it? Who's going to be the captain? What are the prospects? Are the Europeans' ranks depleted because two guys are fighting a war somewhere and so on? So the newspapers were full of anticipation about the impending quadrangular. And in my research for this book, I was reading the newspapers for the weeks leading up to the 1916 quadrangular. And I came across this amazing report. A man called M.D. Pai had been appointed captain of the Hindu team for 1916, which was the biggest honor. And his caste association, from his name, he was a Gaud Saraswat from the Mangalore area. The Gaud Saraswats of Bombay organized a felicitation for him. Right. And I read the news report of that felicitation. And in that felicitation, M.D. Pai said, I am very grateful to my community for felicitating me for becoming the captain of the Hindu team, which is a great honor, but I would like to say that Mr. Palwankar Balu is a better cricketer than me and should have been the captain of the Hindu team. And I was reading this and I was gobsmacked. I was saying this was about 25 years ago when Tendulkar was captain. So actually Kumble should have been captain, right? And can you imagine Tendulkar saying in a press interview, I am honored to be the captain, but actually Mr. Kumble is better qualified than me? Can you imagine Dhoni saying so-and-so is better? I said, yeah, ho nahi sakta. This can't be. No cricketer will ever say this. And then the penny dropped. I realized what he was saying. He was saying, my name is Pai, I'm a Brahmin. The Balu is a better cricketer than me, but he is a Dalit. And of course, Pai, didn't go so far as to say, I refuse to be captain. But he actually said that the honor should have gone to Mr. Balu, my teammate, who is better than me. The guys who ran the Hindu Gymkhana, this being Mumbai of 1916, not of 2017, were hidebound Brahmins and Baniyas, and they couldn't abide the thought of a Dalit being captain here. Impossible. Because it's upturning the caste hierarchy totally. It's, instrumentally you want him to play for you, because at least he'll get the wickets and win you the match. But become captain, lead out the team, do the toss, forget it. So Balu was not made captain. Now the story continues. Balu was one of four brothers. There was Balu, there was Shivaram, there was Ganpat, and there was Vitthal. Vitthal was the youngest. And Vitthal was a batsman. Now, by that time, and Vitthal was the best Hindu batsman also. And he got many hundreds here. Now, by the time Vitthal became an outstanding cricketer, Mahatma Gandhi had come back from South Africa. The movement for the emancipation of Dalits had gathered pace. And Gandhi had said very clearly that we will only get Swaraj if we abolish untouchability. And the upper caste elites of Bombay, including those who ran the Hindu Gymkhana, were beginning to have a guilty conscience, having denied Balu all this while. In 1920, the tournament was played here. M.D. Pai should have been captain of the Hindu team here. M.D. Pai fell sick. Even then, now surely Balu should have been made captain. But no, they appointed a Brahmin from Pune as captain. Balu's brothers, Vitthal and Shivaram, struck from the team. They said, we won't play. It's the first known incident of a player strike in India on proper just grounds. They didn't play. The Hindus lost. They lost the next year. Finally, in 1923, Vitthal was made captain here. And against the Europeans, he got 100. And they won. And he was carried off the ground by upper caste Hindus, shouting, Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. Right. Now, so this field was this field saw something very important where cricket became a vehicle for social emancipation. Through a very long struggle, it took the Palwankar brothers 20 years. It took them 20 years and the advent of Mahatma Gandhi to challenge the prejudice that a Dalit could not have been captain of an Indian team. Now, Vittal had two great advantages. One was that he was 10 years younger than his brother. By the time he came to cricketing maturity, Mahatma Gandhi had transformed the landscape of Indian politics. And secondly, the second great advantage he had was that he was a batsman and not a bowler. There is a real prejudice against bowler captains. Shane Warne was never made captain of Australia. I can tell you he would have been a better captain than Waugh Ponting. Anil Kumble would have been a better captain than Tendulkar, Azharuddin, Ganguly, Dravid, whatever. And he was made captain right at the end of his career, only because there is this idiotic prejudice against bowler captains. Now, as a bowler, I feel particularly strongly about this, but that's a separate question. Now, so Vittal was made captain. Now, briefly. There are some exceptions, briefly. Yeah. So, you know, one person I'd like to mention, very in passing, is someone several of you would have known, and of course Madhav Apte would have played with and under, who is Vijay Merchant. Right. Now, Vijay Merchant has a wonderful description of coming here to watch Vittal bat. You know, and he talks about Vittal. This cry would go, Vijay Merchant was born in about 1910, Makarand? 1911. So, Vittal's heydays 23, 24, 25. So Vijay Merchant is a 11, 12, 13-year-old. He's coming here to watch Vittal bats. And he has written a wonderful account. Vittal, the cry would go up and he would stride out from the pavilion with a blue cap and that cover drive. It's a fabulous description of Vittal batting. And Vijay Merchant being who he was, after Vittal retired from cricket, Vijay Merchant got him a job in Hindustan Mills. Now, how good was Vittal as a batsman? Of course, I never saw him bat. I don't think Vasant Raji, whom Aditya interviewed, he may have seen him bat, but he would be too little young. But I was once talking to Raj Singh. You know, I'm staying now at the CCI, courtesy my host. And many years ago, I was talking to Raj Singh at the CCI, and I was telling him about the story of these Balu brothers. Now, Raj Singh didn't understand the caste dynamics, you know, but he said, Vittal. Raj Singh said, my father saw him bat. Raj Singh's father was a man called Maharawal Lakshman Singh, I think, of Dungarpur, was also creating patron. So Raj Singh said, oh, my father saw him bat. And my father said, Raj Singh said, my father told me Vittal was as good as Hazare. Raj Singh, of course, has told me and all of you, Hazare was as good as Gavaskar. And I have told my son, Gavaskar was as good as Tendulkar. So Vittal was as good as Tendulkar. Is right, by that same logic, right. Or as Virat Kohli. And he scored these hundreds here. Hundreds that were obviously, as Vijay Merchant describes, exquisitely, you know, planned and executed. He was a magnificent stroke player. But hundreds that were a blow against caste orthodoxy and a blow for the emancipation of the Dalits. So that is the, I talked about Shapurji Saurabhji, who struggled against the racism of the Goras, are here. I talked about the Palwankar brothers, who used the cricket field of the Bombay Gymkhana as a theatre to demand equality with upper caste Hindus. And I come lastly and finally to C.K. Naidu. Now, what C.K. Naidu did, through that innings that he played here in 1926, was to instill self-respect among Indians. And I'm going to quote from you some eyewitness accounts of that, rather than tell you from memory, some eyewitness accounts of what that meant. So the innings that has been described by Sally, This is before the test match. This is 1926, when he hit those sixes. E.L. Docker writes in his account of the innings, played here, the importance of the day lay in the emotional scene at the finish, when outside the pavilion in the quickening dusk, people began to gather in little groups, craning their necks, straining every muscle to catch a glimpse of their hero, touch him, garland him with flowers, press gifts into his hand. How he had raised them up, what glories he had shown them. How he had raised them up, what glories he had shown them. Now, again, you have to look at it against the context of the changing political history of India. In the 1890s, Shapurji Saurabhji is fighting against polo players who are encroaching on the Maidan just to allow Indians to play, pick-up cricket, local teams, school cricket. 30 years later, the Indians are allowed to play here. For the first time, there's a full-fledged MCC team that comes to play against them in 1926. And in the Bombay Gymkhana, Indian C.K. Naidu hits 100 with 11 sixes and raises up everyone, all the guys who can't enter here, who are in the makeshift stands around the perimeter. And this leads to the formation of the board. It leads to the first Indian tour of England in 1932. Now, in that tour, this is a time when Indian cricket was run by Maharajas, right? And I once wrote a column in the Hindu many years ago, which I distinguished between two kinds of Maharajas. Princes who played, Tiger Pataudi, Nawab Pataudi, senior, Ranji, Duleep, princes who played, fantastic player, right? So there were princes who played, and Hanuman, there are some other examples, and princes who paid, right? Princes who paid, who couldn't play, but because of who they were, they became captain. Now, one of these was a guy called Maharaja of Porbandar, who was captain of the 1932 England team. And it was said of him, he was the first captain of a touring team to England who owned more Rolls Royces than he scored runs. Right. Now, but he had the wit to understand that he was a prince who paid. So he declined to play the test match and C.K. Naidu became captain. 4 years later, the different story where Vizzy was a prince who paid, wanted to play as well, right? Okay. Now, so in 1932, now by the way, by the time India plays its first test match, C.K. Naidu is 37. 36 or 37, right? Now, that's a... Vittal and Balu could never play test cricket because India didn't have a team. Who knows what they would have done? I mean, the cricketers of today are so incredibly lucky. Right. C.K. Naidu was already 37, but he made an impression. He was there was a wonderful account of a innings at Lord's where a critic said of a 60 hit, the ball was last seen sailing in an easterly direction. Okay. Now, C.K. Naidu was famous for hitting sixes, as you know, right? Now, and he was famous for hitting sixes into cinema studios. I mean, Aditya's book has a six which bisected the border between Worcestershire and Warwickshire because it's across the river. And he once, so I was, when I was doing research for my first book on cricket, because in the East, I met someone in Hyderabad and he said, C.K. Naidu, he hit a six from the Fateh Maidan into the Plaza Cinema. Now, where is Jayantilal? How far is it? From Secunderabad, outside Secunderabad, right? So into the Plaza Cinema, right? Okay. So he hit a six. So Jayantilal is here. Now, so then I met someone in Bangalore who said C.K. Naidu, when he played in RSI Central College ground, he hit a six into the Sagar Talkies. So I was writing it down. By mistake, instead of Sagar Talkies, I wrote Swastik Talkies, which is 3 miles away. So a reviewer said, yes, Plaza Cinema I can understand in Hyderabad, in Secunderabad, but Swastik Cinema in RSI grounds, but I didn't mind because that is the legend of C.K. Naidu. He could easily have hit a six into Swastik Talkies as well. Right? Okay. Now, so incidentally, just as an aside, I'm going to end with a great match I saw, but This is another match I saw. One of the things I did, one of my great memories as a cricket lover was to watch Viv Richards' first Test 100 in Delhi, where he actually hit a six from New Delhi to Old Delhi. Because that's the boundary, if you are playing from one end, you over Ambedkar Stadium. Anyway, so C.K. Naidu was 37, and he was much, by the way, I can carry on, I have a lovely quote to share here. I have time, right? Okay, no. I'll say a little bit, because I've talked a lot about society and politics and cricket. I should say, just read you one quote about C.K. Naidu, the batsman. What kind of batsman he was. I mean, Madhav Apte saw him score 60 runs when C.K. Naidu was already 60, Ranji match. But this is a description I found by an anonymous critic of what kind of batsman C.K. Naidu was. And then I'd like to read it out for the cricket lovers in this room, because it shows that he was much more than merely a six-hitter. Okay. So here is C.K. Naidu, a tribute to C.K. Naidu. In many a pavilion and clubhouse in India, there hangs a photograph of a cricketer standing erect with bat raised, who glares defiantly from under the peak of his cap as though daring a bowler to do his worst. It depicts C.K.'s outlook on the game. C.K. was a genius who brooked no opposition. There was no bowler to whom he would pay deference. He would drive a half volley and then next ball flick one off the middle stump to the fine leg. He would drive a half volley and then next ball flick one off the middle stump the next leg. When he cover drove, it was though someone had wound him up with a key and suddenly released the spring. All right. He would stand on his back foot and crash the ball past the bowler and then move across and back cut the ball between first and second slip, a stroke that can be described as being almost posthumous. What a fabulous description. And it's like, the only Indian cricketer I can think of who played all these strokes was someone who regrettably is known as a six-hitter, Kapil Dev. I've seen Kapil Dev play that late cut as if it was almost posthumous. And the spring being released and the cover drive, right? So he must have been a fabulous player. He was also a magnificent fielder and a reasonably good off-break bowler. What if he had made his test debut at 20 or 35 or 30? People, people don't realize how unlucky some of our older cricketers were. Not just those who played before test cricket, but those who were too old, like C.K. Naidu, or those who lost their best years to the war. I think Merchant, Mankad, and Hazare, what their records would have been like. Merchant, Mankad, those three particularly, Merchant, Mankad, and Hazare. If they had not, and India played one test series every 4 years. Merchant, Mankad, and Hazare must have been as great as any cricketer before or since, and they hardly got the opportunities they deserved. So CK had something, so CK was, he was captain finally in 1932 because Porbandar recognized that he was a prince who paid. And then comes this test match. England finally comes here in 1933, plays a series, and the first match is played here. Now, the details of this match are well known. Amarnath's innings, the partnership with Naidu, our defeat, but an honorable defeat. But I'm going to give you a little bit of context about C.K. Naidu and what he meant. Now, Jardin's team came here and they toured everywhere. And wherever they went, they met C.K. Naidu. C.K. Naidu played the 3 test matches against them, but he also played against the MCC for the Viceroy's 11 at Delhi, for an Indian 11 in Calcutta, for Vizzy's 11 at Banaras, for his own Central India at Indore, for Central Provinces and Berar at Nagpur, for Moinudullah 11 at Secunderabad, and in 3 test matches besides. Jardine was so disgusted that he came to call his opponents C.K. Naidu's roving circus. Now, C.K. Naidu was needed to fill the crowds, to fill the stadiums. He was needed to go everywhere at the roving circus because no one else was known. If you wanted 10, 15, 20,000 people to come, you had to have C.K. Naidu, right? He was Indian cricket's first great superstar. when he hit that 100 against Gillingan's team, here, when he hit that 100, with that bat, when he hit that 100 here, there was, there was a series of felicitations after that. I've talked about how he raised up the crowd, how they felt they were equal to the white man. There were a series of felicitations. There was one at the Gaiety Theatre, which probably doesn't exist, at which the great classical singer Hirabai Barodekar sang. Okay, which is also symbolic because Hirabai Barodekar was half Hindu and half Muslim. And after that, a motorcycle with a sidecar was presented to C.K. Naidu from a subscription raised by the textile workers of Parel. So he was the first Indian sporting superstar. He was a person whose appeal, whose popularity, whose enchantment transcended, caste, class, region, language, and even gender. I found a lovely letter written to C.K. Naidu. C.K. Naidu had taken a break from, like Virat Kohli has taken a break and gone to Italy. Sensible. C.K. Naidu decided enough of being part of a roving circus, I want to go shooting in the jungles. So he went off shooting in the jungles. And a letter followed him by a lady admirer saying, at least in the jungles you'll have the time to read this and reply to me. Right. Okay. All right. Now, so he was that kind of man. Now, he was really our first great superstar. Now, in this tour, I'm going to end with one last quote about C.K. Naidu. Now, in this tour, in which this famous test match with Bombay Gymkhana, and C.K. Naidu went everywhere playing against them, one of the matches he played was in Lahore. And he scored 100 against the MCC. I don't know how many sixes, but there have been a few sixes. And there was a young Indian cricketer in the crowd. And he later wrote about watching C.K. Naidu play. And he said, every sixer hit by C.K. Naidu against the visitors' slow bowlers was as good a nail in the coffin of the British Empire. Every six hit by C.K. Naidu was as good a nail in the coffin of the British Empire. I remember a shot he hit against James Langridge, which sailed over the pavilion at the Lahore Gymkhana ground in what is now called Bagh-e-Jinnah. We madly cheered every shot past the boundary. We madly cheered every shot past the boundary, not only as a cricket performance, but also as an assertion of our resolve to throw the British out of India. Now, that's what C.K. Naidu meant, right? Now, if there is time, I'd love to have time for questions so that we can, expand on, I have many more stories to tell. But I'm going to end with a personal anecdote. Now, when I was asked to come here to speak, I agreed. Because it was C.K. Naidu in the first test match. But I agreed also in part because who was calling me? The person calling me was calling me because thought I was some big shot, the way I think Sunny must have given him an introduction and Makarand must have added to it. So he said, Professor Guha, he must have read whatever, must have been calling me because I have written all these books and so on, and will you come and will you speak? But he thought, he did not know that I agreed in part because the first Ranji match I watched was one in which Vijay Naidu was captain of Madhya Pradesh. Okay, so he was one of my first cricketing heroes. He was calling me as some grand old man and expert on cricket. But he didn't know that he was one of my first cricketing heroes. I was 10 years old. I was 10 years old in Dehradun. And Dehradun hosted a match, UP versus Madhya Pradesh, where Vijay Naidu was the captain. And I remember he stood very close at city mid-off. Man, I'd never seen that before. So that was my first Ranji match. Now, a little later, I transferred allegiance. I was living in Dehradun, but I was born in Dehradun, but my family came from Bangalore. And I very smartly transferred my cricketing allegiance from UP to Karnataka. Because UP was, with due respect to Central Zone, the worst team in the worst zone. All right. And Karnataka had Vishwanath, Prasanna, and Chandrasekhar who had just played. So I transferred my allegiance to Karnataka, and my change of loyalty, my betrayal, like those who joined switch parties and made minister and chief minister, no, like that. Same way, my disloyalty was rewarded when 3 years later, Karnataka became the first team to beat Bombay in a match of which I watched every ball. All right. Now, and I've been a besotted, obsessed Karnataka follower ever since, so much so that Rajdeep Sardesai once wrote in disgust, Guha's excessive love for the Karnataka cricketers may cause another Kaveri dispute. All right. And it is excessive, and I'm particularly happy to be here because of the fact that just last week, Karnataka beat Bombay by an innings. And may there be many such victories in the future. Thank you very much.
That was truly wonderful. Really well. We'll take some question and answers. We have Ram here, so yeah.
Any anecdotes, questions you would like to? Yes, sir. A mic is coming. Mic is coming. Come.
Any comments on the administration of cricket today through the Board of Control?
Yeah.
A lot of controversy, there's been a lot of disputes, and just your comments on what can be done and should be done.
You know, I should say, I resigned from the Committee of Administrators 6 months ago. And this is my first time I've commented in public on cricket. Because I'm not commenting on cricket, because I tried for 6 months, whatever I had to say was in my resignation letter. It's not fair on the BCCI or my colleagues to say anything else. And because it's C.K. Naidu and Vijay Naidu and the Bombay Gymkhana, I came. But I'll make one comment. And that was after reading Aditya's book. And it's retelling of a famous story, which is the massive dispute between C.K. Naidu and Vinu Mankad. You guys know it? All of you know it? How many of you know the... You want me to tell the story again, or no, it's not important?
Say it.
Huh? Okay, so essentially, C.K. Naidu was chairman of selectors. Vinu Mankad was India's greatest cricketer at the time. India was touring England in 1952. Vinu Mankad had got a contract from Haslington in the Lancashire League. And in those days, there was no money for cricketers, and they had to take a contract to make a living. So Vinu Mankad told the board, if you assure me that I will be in the Indian team to tour England in 1952, I will not take this contract. And C.K. Naidu said, we do not give assurances to anyone. Right. So Mankad went. India was humiliated in the first test. SOS went. Haslington released him. Mankad played in Lords and got 172 and got 5 wickets. Okay. At that, of course, then there was a Ranji match in which Madhav Apte played, where Mankad was captain of Bombay.